afternoon, everyone. Thank you for this opportunity. I'm wearing my tie. I don't like ties, but my wife said I shall because it's my first conference. Okay, let's start it. Yeah.
Listen to his wife.
My topic is about some of the reflections I've done over the years at my previous employment and at STADIO as well. And that's why I started with the whole notion of moving beyond templates. And I'll show how that can actually, we can take that forward just now. I just like this quote from our previous president. Education is the most powerful weapon we can use to change the world. And I think that's one of the things that actually energize me in working in curriculum and in higher education, is that we have that power to change the world. And it gives us an incredible sense of responsibility and also the awe that we can see that we are changing people's lives. And that is exciting. And that's, I think, part of why we are here at conferences like these. Now, we probably all know this, that there's the whole approach in education that everyone, it's a one size fits all, everyone has to take the same exam. And why I use this picture is that sometimes in situations like this, we have the answer already embedded in that situation. We could say, this is impossible. Not every individual can actually achieve this test or this outcome. But they might be embedded in our environment or in the persons or the resources that we have, something that can give us a key to unlocking innovation. And this is why this session is about responsible technology-enabled curriculum innovation. Is how do we look at our circumstances? Because we tend to be focused a lot of times on the constraints. We don't have that. This is too expensive. We don't have the expertise in that. How can we actually change that narrative? And I found this interesting picture, and it actually just opened up a whole sense of innovation. Is that we have the elephant, and the elephant can push down the tree, and then everyone can achieve the goal or the exam. And I think that's the idea I want to start off with. And to start off, a little bit of my background, and I think that feeds into what I'm trying to say today. And again, the numbers are not important, it's the learning that takes place. And I've been privileged to learn from so many disciplines. Design, IT, education, media, and, engineering, and so the list goes on. And in this specific topic, I want to basically focus on a number of things. I'm going to talk a little bit about curriculum development in the 6 honors persons framework, and then 2 sides of the coin. And the critical thing that my whole presentation will be about is how do we move beyond templates? Because in curriculum development, now these templates, where do they come from? Anyone? When you apply for a new program, you have to fill in templates, application forms. Where do they come from? Not a trick question. Regulated bodies like the CHE, DET, they require us to complete applications which they need to approve according to certain criteria. And they generate templates for that. The problem is that we can become so focused on the template that we forget about the information within those templates. And that's why I am, through my experience, I want to try and encourage us to rather think of templates not as templates, but as curriculum dialogue spaces. And that has been the joy for me in the past and over the years, is to become involved in the conversations around curriculum that we engage with. And then I'm going to quickly show you a live demonstration of the system that I'm developing to support this dialogue. Now, Richard Kipling, he wrote a poem. It's the Elephant Child, which is interesting if you look at the previous picture about the elephant. That was totally incidental. He said, I keep 6 honest, he used the term men, I just made it more recent in terms of persons, because we need to be inclusive. And they taught me all I knew. What, why, when, how, where, and who. And I found this as a framework very useful when you talk about curriculum. And on the right-hand side, I've just divided it into 2 arbitrary, strategic, and operational dimensions. For me, curriculum is inherently about what, why are you teaching what you're teaching? If you decide on an element in a curriculum, why? Is there a need for it? Is it important, etc.? And then once that part of curriculum tells you what we typically call the imagined curriculum, the ideal curriculum, and there's a whole range of terminology that is used for that. That is when we actually design the curriculum and develop it and think, what are we going to do? Then we get to that strategic. It's in line with the needs of industry and society, the needs of regulatory bodies like CHE and DED. But then we need to go and see, how do we implement, how do we enact what we've developed and designed, and envisage how do we actually enact that in practical learning, teaching, and assessment. And that's where the operational comes in. Then we need to ask, when is this going to happen? Where and how? Blended learning, classroom, face-to-face learning, and all the modalities that we are engaged with. And who is going to do that? Now, the important thing is, I see we need to understand that curriculum development, that's the envisaged curriculum, and pedagogy, which is the enactment of that vision, are 2 sides of the same coin. And technically, we can't really separate them because they need to happen as a holistic whole. But when we develop curriculum and we ask the question, why are we teaching what we're teaching, we are taking a step back and say, okay, let's look at the one side and understand where we are going. And then we go to the other side and we say, how do we implement that? And it's a continuous conversation, and that's why I like the word dialogue, because dialogue unlocks a lot of things. The problem is people are sometimes scared in curriculum about dialogue, because there's a whole range of contentions and tensions and challenges in curriculum development, as in teaching and learning as per se. And I've just highlighted a number of them, and I'm not going to go into detail, but I think this is just the backdrop in terms of where we operate. We work with templates, but there are processes involved, and some of these processes are linear, some of them are not, some of them are iterative. Sometimes we have to go back. We design something and develop something, and then we realize, whoops, the technology has changed, or the world has changed, and we need to go back and redo or rethink. We need to look at compliance. We need to comply, because the CHE won't give us accreditation if they don't agree with the vision that we put forward. But it's not just about mere tick box compliance or a technicist view of just minimum compliance. It's about how do we bring in innovation. Sometimes innovation challenges a mere compliance approach. And how do we deal with these challenges? And this way, conversation and dialogue comes in very strongly. And the one thing I want to emphasize is static information and dynamic information. What I'm going to show you just now is my understanding. The big challenge with templates is that when you capture the information in a Word document, it becomes static information. And that's the problem with organizational information. A lot of information, a lot of knowledge in an organization is captured in a document. But it doesn't do anything. You need to find the document, and then you need to open the document to see and engage with the information. The problem with that is that it becomes static. Now, how do we change that into a more dynamic? And this is where the whole notion of databases, interlinking, and repurposing and all of that comes in. And that is what we are trying to establish with a new program development system at STADIO, is to say, how can we start moving towards dynamic information? Give you a practical example of that. I've seen cases where people develop learning outcomes for a module, or module outcomes. And that is captured in a module outlines document. They use that outlines in another document called assessment criteria. But the problem is sometimes you don't necessarily use a central point for information. So you sometimes end up with documents with 2 or 3 different versions. And that's the challenge, because now you get a new person teaching in a particular module. They give you an assessment guidelines with differing outcomes to the module outlines. We call in IT, we call that data redundancy. So the idea is that we need to limit that so that we work on one document. And how can we achieve that? And I want to jump into my idea is we need to, thank you, we need to have an integrated, interactive, and iterative system. And the biggest challenge I've found over the years with curriculum development is, where do you start? And what I've done is, on Teams, I've utilized an Excel document, because I love Excel. That's one of the reasons why I did it. Incidentally, why is Excel so important is it relates to what I started at the beginning. Looking at your own situation and discovering things that you can use. I've read an article that the average person has about 10% expertise in Excel. That's scary. I myself, I've heard people say, I'm an Excel expert. I say, no, there's no such thing as an Excel expert, because there's so many possibilities. I've seen scary things in Excel. But what it illustrates to me is that sometimes we think we need to develop all these wonderful new systems. I contacted a company, they have software that they develop overseas that does the whole curriculum development system. It's a whole integrated system. I said, what does it cost? $500,000. So I don't know how much that is in rands. But then I thought, and my challenge was, but we should go back and look, what do we have currently? Because in that, we might have things that can actually provide solutions. Which means that we could, without spending a cent, we could actually unlock affordances and potential and things to do without spending more money. And I think that's the important thing that I want to emphasize. Is that I'm going to use Excel. And what I use it for as a starting point. So what I tell heads of school and schools and the curriculum team, your first step is to go to Teams, and there's a document called in the general channel that's called the dashboard, which provides a starting point. And in this document, we use a concept of what we call links, hyperlinks. And hyperlinks are wonderful because they can take you anywhere and they can pull in information and all of that. And what I've done here is the second component. You start off with your dashboard. It tells you what program you're working on. It tells you what the due dates are. It tells you are you on track or what is your progress. So it communicates a lot of information. Now we get to the exciting part. There's a link, and this link opens up in a thing called Smartsheet. And it is actually quite small. This is the project plan. Now, the biggest challenge with curriculum development is to take an incredible amount. Now, you can see, and this is why I wanted to show you in real life terms. If I scroll down, there's an incredible amount of steps and things that you have to do to get to a point where you can submit this information to CHE for an accreditation evaluation. Project management is very useful, but the problem is I don't want to just tell people, go to the project plan and get lost, because that's what can happen. And this is where I want to say, let's start with a structured and designed process. Now, what I've done is, this is a whole plan for everything, but we're breaking it down into phases and steps. Now, again, we use another technology that we have. We've got teams. Now, in the Smartsheet, you can attach files, but you can also attach links. Now, I just want to show you quickly. If I click on that, I can open the link. Now, the important principle here is that the project management plan is to give you an overview of the whole process, but then to link directly in a planned fashion to specifics. And this resonates with what we heard earlier this morning, is that the problem is with technology, sometimes we're exposed to so many tasks, but to actually reduce that to monotasks, to focus. And remember, I said one of the challenges, sometimes you need to focus, sometimes you need to look at the big picture, and the balancing of that. Now, what is nice about the document is that this document lives in teams, in specific channels. This document is then the ultimate document. Everyone working on the curriculum will complete this document, and then all the reviewers, like me, myself, Esther, and Yapi, will also have access, and then we can review it. It also brings in interactiveness. We can actually, somebody can type something, and then I can decide, okay, I'm going to edit that, or I can start bringing in comments, and then I can mention somebody. I can also assign a task to that person. And we've seen this happening already, where I asked somebody a question, I think it was Willie, I asked him a question, and then he said, oh yeah, that's something he's not sure because he's borrowing this module from somebody else. So he just put in a comment there, I think it was to Trader as well, and he said, I tried to help you, and Trader was able to give the answer. So again, this is for me providing the opportunity to integrate and to communicate in one place. So at the end of the day, you don't have 5 or 6 versions of the same document, you have one. And this becomes the definitive answer. And the important thing is that's why it's a dialogue, not a template. And the mind shift, what it means is that you need to be brave enough to put your ideas there. Because you know, and that's the problem, I think. Sometimes we're scared to put our ideas there because somebody is going to think, what nonsense is this? It's not nonsense. There's only one stupid question in life. And that is the question not asked. So as soon as you ask a question, if you're not sure, again, we need to get to a point where we actually start a dialogue, because we are building something very precious. we're building the future. And I just need to get back to my presentation. So, in closing, I'm recommending that we start having these dynamic and rich curriculum dialogue. Put your ideas there, and let's collectively work on them, improve them. Use the tools that we have. We don't have to spend a lot of money on additional tools because there are so many things in the existing tools that we might not even be aware of. And that we can discover and say, oh, wow. And going forward, we need to embrace and see how we can make this dynamic so that we can repurpose. In the future, what I'm envisioning is that one day you want to start a new program. And then in your program, you're going to bring in problem solving. Now, instead of starting from scratch, you go to a database and you say, give me all the problem solving outcomes in STADIO at level 5. And you can look at them and say, okay, wow, this is interesting. Which one of these are more relevant to my field? And then we can start developing this dynamic understanding. What does problem solving at level 5 mean within STADIO? I thank you.